What is the future of ethics and corporate sustainability in retail? That's the question presented with our facilitator, Bill Bowie, who is the co-founder of Convedit and the Sustainability Context Group. He was also the author of the first ever sustainability report for Walmart. Welcome, Bill.
Thanks, Gene. Great to be here again.
Let's look at theme number 7, scenario analysis, a deeper dive in actual versus virtual. What's the question that you put out to the panel here?
Yeah, we had done an earlier theme around scenario analysis in general. And so what we did in this theme is to take a deeper dive with one particular sort of aspect of those scenarios, the actual engagement in the retail space, so in-person, bricks and mortar, face-to-face, as compared to virtual engagement. So think Siri and Alexa and the virtualization of the retail experience.
Well, it's a fantastic conversation. I look forward to getting into it. Let's talk about the panelists that participated and contributed.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit more about the top three later, but we really have a well-rounded panel, in particular, folks like Bruce Clafter and Maria Leo and Joss Tantrum been making really solid contributions throughout. And then we had some newer voices coming into the mix, Natalie Calhoun, Joan Darmody, and Alexandra Sokol amongst them. Again, I'll tell you a little bit more about the consistently high-value voices a little bit later in this webcast.
What I really love about this, Bill, is you're going to talk about some very specific real-world examples where this is actually being successful today. Walk us through your executive summary.
Yeah, sure. So really, what we looked at were some specific case examples. So one participant, Bill Roth, proposed the idea of Apple and looking at Apple as an example of this scenario, or the idea of blending an in-person restaurant experience with online retail. So those were some of the very specific points that they made. I also should mention that this was the last theme in this particular discovery board. It had kind of rounded out the conversation. And so, the end of this theme was spent doing some summarizing of the overarching discovery board.
Well, you did mention Apple, which is key point number 1, this case study. Walk us through your findings.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Bill Roth proposed this case study of Apple where it really identified 5 key steps that a legacy retailer could learn by looking at the example of Apple. In particular, its leadership, its customer aspirations focus, its personal value versus values, values added, consumer connection, the authentic marketing voice of Apple, which I think we all know, and then finally the disruptive change is the new norm. And just that last one, I'm sure we can see where Apple was really, not understood. And then Joss Tantrum just tacked onto that by saying that we're starting to see the rise of this kind of values-driven brands, which are aiming to provide utility and customer satisfaction with ethics and sustainability kind of baked into the corporate culture and business model.
Well, disruptive is the way of the future, especially as we start looking at this AI and machine learning. Let's get into key point number 2.
Yeah, so this was looking at how AI can be used to enable customer service that integrates sustainability and ethical elements into the engagement process. So, one of the things that we mentioned here was that there's a lot of potential in there so that AI can draw on big data to provide analytics in the customer service process that essentially gives prompts for sustainable choices. So that's the promise. We also had counterbalancing it, the caution, particularly Bruce Clafter, who's with Flex, said that really there's a rising risk of potential conflicts where all of this private information of consumers that's needed to drive those kind of AI machine learning could actually, create ethical problems. So it's something that isn't it isn't a quick fix. It isn't an easy fix. So it does have to take a lot of this nuance into account.
It really gets quite playful, right? This idea of taking restaurants and brick and mortars or other types of businesses and having them form some forms of synergy, right?
Yeah, so this is where Lisa Lauren just sort of put out there, envision the restaurant experience, which is inherently an in-person experience. So this is where it ties into our theme of actual engagement, where you're using the opportunity of something that's inherently in person and optimizing it by linking it into virtual engagement for related retail opportunities, so that you could use the restaurant experience to do some online purchasing. So that was the idea that was proposed, and then the panel took it to extrapolate what the ethical and sustainability implications of that are.
And let's get into key point number 4, which is agility, which is, again, I think this theme is in every single thing dealing with the business of today and tomorrow, right? Staying agile.
Yeah, so this is something that I think there's a strong overlap between the kind of disruptive technology in retail and sustainability. Both of them really are fast moving and require agile innovation. Also, Joan Darmody mentioned that it's really the innovation mindset that has to be embraced. So innovation, both in terms of innovative uses of technology, but also innovative, sustainable business models.
And in key point number 5, this is the grand summary and synthesis of all this stuff, right?
Yeah, so this is where I just, I put it out that we had a couple of days left to kind of tie it all together. And again, Bill Roth kind of rose to the occasion, as he's been doing throughout, and summarized it with the statement that commercially, retailers must move at the speed of competition to innovate and simplify, noting that incremental change in today's economy is sort of the equivalent of a slow death. And he said that the exact same thing applies to sustainability, that right now sustainability is achieving incremental improvement, but that's actually not going to achieve sustainability. So what's needed is really massively disruptive innovation in order to address things like climate change or global obesity, et cetera. So David Feidner, another of our sort of key participants, took a different angle on, different but related, where he was saying that legacy retail has these long supply chains, but increasingly consumers have direct information accessibility of those supply chains. So it sort of eliminates this information gap. As well, consumers are engaging digitally more and more. So there's another information gap that's being closed in terms of consumer habits. So he sees the ability to kind of combine these to create a virtuous cycle that also enables the democratization of sustainability. So it was really an interesting pulling together all of the themes and connecting the dots in the final hour here.
Must be impossible to pick out 3 that really stood out because there were so many standouts. But tell us about these 3.
Yeah, these 3 have really been quite active at a high level throughout. So Bill Roth, the founder of Earth 2017, has really been a leader throughout, particularly in posing issues that then get a lot of engagement from other participants. Likewise for Lisa Lauren, who's the CEO of Earthshift Global. She's often been putting out ideas that kind of challenge some of the more facile suggestions. So, people who will put out an idea that seems like it may be a solution, she'll sort of dig underneath it and say, well, but what about this perspective or that perspective? So she's been a really great voice for creating a more holistic view. Finally, David Feidner has consistently brought in a perspective that sort of synthesizes much of what has been talked about. So David is able to take the existing statements that have been coming out and crystallize them. So these three players in particular have been operating at a very high level of engagement. As you said, Gene, though, only the top three, it's the tip of the iceberg of a really strong group for this theme.
Boy, what a marvelous board. Great facilitating, Bill. I really appreciate all this great information you shared with us today and look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, Gene. I look forward to it too.